Okay, we're going to get this next keynote session for Birmingham Tech Week 2020 underway, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Adrian Joseph, OBE, who's a Managing Director, Group AI and Data Solutions at BT Group. Adrian's going to be talking to us today about how AI can transform your business and deliver powerful results. Just like to give a big shout out to our kind of leading partners this week. The week is being run in association with Tech Nation, the West Midlands Growth Company, and Department for International Trade. Big shout out and thank you to all the work they do across the region, but also internationally by showcasing what Birmingham and the West Midlands can deliver to an international audience and across the UK as well. So thank you for those organisations for being our lead partners. Thank you also to our sponsors. Of course, this week wouldn't be possible without you. Big shout out to NatWest, who are our lead partner and sponsor this year, and they are a big contributor to Birmingham Tech Week. And then Copper, Culture Group, BJSS, Sidetrade and BMET for your generosity and support as well. And then last but not least, our 2020 partners as well. So from across kind of the private sector and public sector as well, from some great organisations, public sector, tech, digital, media, culture and sport, and also Enterprise Nation, West Midlands Combined Authority as well. So we're going now to kind of introduce Adrian to you all. So Adrian has had a fantastic career, and he, as I mentioned, is the Managing Director of Group AI and Data Solutions at BT Group. Prior to this, he was a partner at Ernst & Young, now known as EY, of course, and led AI, advanced analytics and data teams in financial services in the UK and Europe. He also has over 10 years cloud digital, data science and analytics experience, gaining senior leadership roles at Google and a further 15 years in industry and consultancy. He served as a non-executive director of the UK government, where he was on the board of the Home Office for over 4 years and is currently a NED to the People Board of the Cabinet Office. He previously served as chair of the Race Equality Board, the Race Campaign of Business in the Community, for 5 years and was a trustee of Aletto, a charity that helps non-privileged young people. He was awarded an OBE for services to equality and diversity in business in the Queen's New Honours List in 2019 and was announced as the most influential Black, Asian and minority ethnic technology leader in the UK by the Financial Times and Inclusive Boards in 2018. I'm sure you'll all agree that we're very lucky to have Adrian along with us today. Adrian, I wondered if you could just say a few words about your current role at BT and what you're up to these days.
Yeah, thank you, Yanis, and thank you for the invitation to present today. Birmingham is a major area for us, one of our key areas from a number of perspectives. We have about 6,000 employees in Birmingham and the wider Midlands area, and we're soon going to be moving into 3 Snow Hill, which has been a little bit delayed due to COVID, but we'll have about 3,000 to 4,000 people there early in the new year. So back to your question about my role. So my role really is to look across all of the data and AI assets across BT, whether they sit in the consumer part of our business, the enterprise part of our business, global, in our R&D center, in technology, and figure out how do we unlock the value in those beautiful assets. And when I say value, I mean both business value and societal value. So, for example, we're using some of our data assets to help the government evaluate the efficacy of its COVID-19 actions. So, delighted to be here. I hadn't quite appreciated before I joined BT just how vast our data and AI assets are, and I didn't know that we had more AI patents in the UK, for example, than anybody else. I didn't know that we had relationships with 40 different universities, including Cambridge and, of course, all of the great British universities, but also with MIT and in China and in other parts of the world. So delighted to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
My pleasure. And again, I did not realize that. I did not realize BT had so many different AI patterns. So there you go. You learn something new every day. So Adrian, it'd be great to know kind of, what's going on in AI at the moment.
Yeah, so I thought I'd start with this slide. Thank you. And it's my belief that we will see, we have a member, algorithm will be a member of a FTSE 250 board in the next 20 years. So why do I say this? I say this because in many parts of our lives, algorithms are outperforming us already. We've all seen, the chess results. We've seen things like the DeepMind, AlphaGo. We've seen multiplayer poker being outperformed by algorithms, often over long periods of time. So, but beyond the gaming stuff, in medicine, we're seeing AI outperform in areas of cancer detection. So, one of them, one where I saw AI skin cancer, 95% accuracy versus 86% for expert doctors. So there are a number of areas, and AI is also getting creative. I don't know if anybody picked up, but Christie's sold a piece of art that was entirely generated by an algorithm for $432,500 some months ago. So there are a number of areas where we're seeing this. And why does it matter? Well, it matters because of the business value that we can see unlocked. And you can see that in some of the stats from McKinsey and PwC, for example. Microsoft did this global piece of research looking at companies that are outperforming in scaled manifestations of AI, delivering 11.5% better returns than the average. So it really matters, to the top line and to the bottom line. Of course, to feed these beautiful algorithms, we need data, and most of the world's data is being created recently. Most of it is unstructured, and we've figured out how to manage these bigger data assets more effectively than we previously did, and cloud is a key part of that. But the other points I'd make in starting is say that we really have to balance the value unlock with being really careful about ethics, trust, privacy, and managing data and algorithms sensitively and carefully. And in the midst of the pandemic, we've seen, that data and data science and algorithms have become much more important than they ever were, and we're going to see that continue. Look at the digital transformation that we've all gone through in the last 6 months. So you see some of the numbers here about marketers and in other industries, that are increasingly going to be focused on data and AI. And I guess the final point I'm making starting is that it's my belief that it's the combination of algorithms and people that will outperform either people or the algorithm. So human in the loop, if you like, type dimensions, is the way in which I really think about AI.
And that's fascinating. I mean, some of those statistics there, Adrian, really bring to life what AI is doing right now. And I wonder if we can kind of now just look at kind of how that all comes together in terms of kind of business results and how that kind of can benefit organizations.
Yeah, so I mean, some of the business results, I've shared here, but maybe it would be helpful. I've got a video that brings to life what I mean by AI. And when I say AI, I don't mean a generalized AI that's going to take over human thinking and humanity. I mean the 4 key patterns that exist within AI. First of which is machine learning, and really it underpins pretty much all of the patterns. Another one is computer vision, so the ability to look at things like cancer charts, for example, and figure out what's going on, or in self-driving cars, for example. Another one is NLP, so natural language processing or generation or understanding. And then the final one is knowledge graphs. So they're looking at the connections between different entities. But I thought I'd show a video, which is from Babylon Health, that will bring, and then maybe we'll play the video, and then I'll talk a little bit about what you've seen in the video. But some things to look out for. It using computer vision to look at the patient's face to see whether she is confused or calm, and so on. It's auto-generating a number of questions for the doctor. So let's play the video, and then I'll come back and talk to what you've just seen.
Hi Louise, my name's Dr. Kultag Archer. Nice to meet you.
Hi, nice to meet you too.
So I can see you've completed our AI assessment, and from this, can I confirm that you've been having dizziness for a few months now, with some hearing loss and also some ringing in your ears?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, you look quite comfortable at the moment, so does the dizziness come and go?
Yeah, I don't have it at the moment.
Okay, and when you do get the dizziness, how long do the symptoms last?
A few hours at a time, I'd say, probably, yeah.
Okay, and does changing the position of your head bring on the dizziness? Sorry, what I mean to say is, do you get dizzy, for example, when you turn your head to look to one side or when you turn over in bed?
Oh, okay, no.
Have you felt sick or vomited when you get the dizziness?
No.
Okay. And is there anything else you wanted to tell me about your symptoms? For example, have you had any headache, any weakness, any numbness at all?
No.
Okay. According to our records, you also had glandular fever a few months ago. Has that all settled?
Yeah, that was awful. That's gone now.
Great. I mean, just looking at the blood test results from back then, they all came back normal as well.
Great.
So I would agree with our AI assessment. It looks like your symptoms are being caused by an ear condition called Meniere's disease. This causes a build-up of pressure within the balance center,
Okay.
and that's what causes those awful dizzy episodes that you've been getting.
Stop there, Yanis. Yeah, so just looking at the screen at the moment, a couple of things happening here that I want to highlight. So hopefully you saw, signals coming up using computer vision that said Louise was confused or neutral. That was using computer vision to detect her emotional state and discern these things. And it was then feeding questions into the doctor, dynamically generating questions to help him ask, better informed questions, if you like. On the right-hand side, that whole conversation was transcribed. And I mentioned earlier that I thought AI was outperforming us in language skills, in translation and transcription. So all of that data has now been captured without the doctor having to write any notes. It's all there for future interrogation. And then at the bottom, what was happening was using machine learning techniques to look at the possible causes and updating those in real time. So this is real stuff that's happening at the moment that I think really brings together those AI patterns that I'd mentioned before. But I thought maybe if we jump to the next slide, I would share some of the things that we're doing in BT to bring some of this to life. So there are a number of ways in which AI operates really, really well. So prediction is one of the areas where it works really well. Classification, so looking at patterns and forming groups, it does very, very well. And then things like anomaly detection. So especially helpful in the area of looking at fraud detection, spam calls. So we use all of these areas in our business. Just to give you some sense, so on the inform side, we do things like workforce management, looking at shift patterns, modeling, and optimization to maximize the effectiveness of our workforce rosters, for example. So that's one of the areas where we do that. In terms of prediction, so things like fault volumes we do as well, but also looking at predicting sales opportunities using machine learning models in our enterprise sales teams, which help with some cost prioritizing and the propensity to close by acting on some of the other factors that correlate with bid success. So and then also using network insight and risk management with statistical models to auto-correct anomalies in our network. On the sort of automation side, we're doing things that allow us to in real time look at the sense of or potential for cyber threats. And I know for many of us this will be a big area of concern. But I also mentioned things like nuisance calls, by using anomaly detection to discern call patterns to detect whether this is unusual behavior and likely to be a nuisance call. And then we do a lot in the optimization space with, I've mentioned network optimization, but also things like inventory repair optimization using image and video analytics and deep learning networks to identify network inventory and correct records. So these are just some of the examples of how we're using AI in our own business. And of course, there are many other examples in financial services. We can find areas where, for example, call centers using NLP, so virtual agents and chatbots, enable us to drive in a lot of efficiencies. And we can do things, of course, like predict customer churn that helps to improve loyalty and next best action. So many use cases, whether you're in financial services, in healthcare, in telecoms, in legal profession, pretty much in any profession, we can find examples of where AI will drive a lot of business value.
And I think it's clear to see there that any business operating in this world right now should be considering AI as part of their kind of suite of services, because it can deliver so many benefits and optimizations across the entire organization. Adrian, how is AI linking into some of the other technologies such as 5G, IoT, and of course the emergence of smart cities as well?
Yeah, so I mean, if you think about IoT and smart cities, a lot of that is around sensors and data capture. And so, what happens in that world is massive complexity, right? I mentioned the growth in data, 90% of the world's data in the last 2 years. But, I think it's just something like 10% of all of the devices that could be connected to the internet are at the moment. So imagine a world where we move from just 10% of connected devices to 20% to 50%. Imagine the data explosion that we're going to see when that happens. And of course that drives a ton of complexities. Networks become much more defined under 5G by software than hardware. And so we need more AI to help us to manage in a scalable way to unlock the insights in the data. And the thing that I fixate about is how do we use AI to drive insights that help us to make better decisions that drive business value for us. And so I spend a lot of time thinking about how do we help drive more revenue, improve efficiency, manage risk more effectively, and I've talked about some of those examples as well as improving customer experience. And so you can imagine with sensors and smart cities, a world where we become able to think about AI taking over things like traffic management and integrating well with some of the devices that we have and some of the applications within there. Things like appointment management on our behalf beginning to happen because we understand supply and demand within a smart city and within an ecosystem. Parking, water leakages. One of the insurance companies that I'm aware of recently invested in an IoT company that is looking at water leakage. A lot of what drives claims in insurance is to do with water leakages. And so if we're able to predict that more effectively with sensors and so on, then that becomes really interesting. I guess the other point I would make is around edge, right? And I saw a prediction from Gartner that suggested maybe, I don't know, 80% of the world's data will exist on edge devices, at, I don't know, 10 to 20 years in the future. And if you think about how we get data coming in, a lot of the data comes in on our devices, or on sensors. And so if we're able to provide compute power at that point, then a lot of interesting things begin to happen on the edge. So those are some of the implications, I would say, of in terms of AI on IoT, on connected cities, and 5G. Yeah.
We've got one question from a member of the audience here, Sally. So Sally asks, so it's clear to see the benefits of AI, and you talked about kind of the emergence of more and more data and more connected devices. But of course, with all of that comes an issue around privacy and trust. How do we ensure that we're, I guess, informing consumers or end users that we are acting responsibly when it comes to their devices, their connectivity, and their data as well?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Sally. Great question. And yeah, we do have to balance, to my opening statement, the value unlock with privacy and ethics and trust. And there are a number of dimensions to that. So one is, of course, we need to do the legal stuff and privacy, and make sure we have the right consents. But I see consent probably emerging, something I call sort of next generation consent, where we as users have much more control over our individual data. Look at some of the stuff that was announced in the US last week about breaking up some of the big tech companies. Look at the news in the FT this morning that was again pointing to the EU, potentially looking at, getting much more active in looking at how our data is being used. So I can see, permissioning moving to being really dynamic, frictionless, real time. So what I sort of call next generation consent and permissions management, and us having much more control about how our data is shared and with whom, and only releasing the bits of our data that we need to. But I can also imagine having, this sort of safe space that we have more control over our data and the ability to people is around the era of surveillance capitalism and how our data has been monetized by many of the big technology companies primarily. And how do we take back a degree of control over that by having our own data, being able to share the bits, as I said, but then having an AI agent on top of that is helping you find the best car insurance, or auto-populating your tax return, or advising, if you change address, advising everybody that needs to be told about your address. So there are a number of things that we can do on top of that. So then there's the next layer, the sort of ethics and the ethics layer, right? So we've, can you do something is the sort of legal construct, and the ethical construct is should you. So and again, we've got a lot of thinking in this space. The EU published some guidelines here. The UK and 40 other countries have published things like looking at bias, things like looking at transparency, things like looking at vulnerability, and so on. So those are some of my comments, Sally, around very, very important question about managing, the getting that balance right. And then final point, if I may, is I also see technology playing more of a role in here. So thinking about things like federated learning that mean that we can do cool stuff, unlock insight without having to, create a massive data pool, for example, or some of the encryption techniques like homomorphic encryption that enable us to deliver insight without actually having to understand, the user's details about you as an individual.
Yeah, I think there's some really salient points, because I think by empowering the user to be able to kind of in real time decide what they want to opt into and what they want to share, I think that's integral. But also that level of encryption, how do we make kind of the data safer when being passed through? I've got another question. You okay, Adrian, to kind of keep taking questions at this point?
Yeah, please do. Absolutely fine.
Great.
Yeah.
So
I
it's
do have a video maybe to share, Yanis. I do have a video to share on the question. You know, so I don't know whether we want to show that now, just to bring it to life
yeah,
a little bit, or whether we want to save it for later.
yeah. Let's do that actually, and then I'm gonna take a
All
few
right.
minutes because we've got them coming in thick and fast now.
Let-
So yeah, this
let me-
links into a question, I guess, that we spoke about before this, which was around I guess kind of ethics when it comes to AI, and making sure that, you know, our responsibility as business owners is to develop AI in the right way. And I know you wanted to share this, so I'm going to kind of play the video, and then we kind of pick.
Let me just maybe before we hit the play button, Yanis, thank you. Is to say that this is a video from an MIT professor who also happens to be a poet, and she formed what's called the Algorithmic Justice League, to think exactly about the question that Sally and Yanis, you and I were talking about, and of course, you know, is on the minds of many people. So with that context, you know, I've said we can do beautiful things with AI. Have a look at some of the risks, though, that exist, and the very good question about trust.
My heart smiles as I bask in their legacies, knowing their lives have altered many destinies. In her eyes, I see my mother's poise. In her face, I glimpse my auntie's grace. In this case of deja vu, a 19th century question comes into view. In a time when Sojourner Truth asked, "Ain't I a woman?" Today, we pose this question to new powers, making bets on artificial intelligence, hope towers. The Amazonians peek through windows blocking deep blues as faces increment scars. Old burns, new urns, collecting data chronicling our past, often forgetting to deal with gender, race, and class. Again, I ask, ain't I a woman? Face by face, the answers seem uncertain. Young and old, proud icons are dismissed. Can machines ever see my queens as I view them? Can machines ever see our grandmothers as we knew them? Ida B. Wells, data science pioneer, hanging facts, stacking stats on the lynching of humanity, teaching truths hidden in data, each entry and omission, a person worthy of respect. Shirley Chisholm, unbought and unbossed, the first Black Congresswoman, but not the first to be misunderstood by machines well-versed in data-driven mistakes. Michelle Obama, unabashed and unafraid to wear her crown of history, yet her crown seems a mystery to systems unsure of her hair. A wig, a bouffant, a toupee? Maybe not. Are there no words for our braids and our locks? The sunny skin and relaxed hair make Oprah the first lady. Even for her face, well known, some algorithms falter, echoing sentiments that strong women are men. We laugh, celebrating the successes of our sisters with serena smiles. No label is worthy of our beauty. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's really good. It was wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you, Yanis. So a very, very powerful reminder of, despite, you know, us living in a world where we're approaching level 5 self-driving cars, we're at level 4, of course, and all of the things that I said previously, right, that we've seen gender bias, we've seen ethnicity bias, you see it both coming together here. And so we do need to be very, very careful about what I call sort of 3 levels of bias that I think we need to think through. One is bias in the data, and that can explain a lot of it. 2 is bias in the algorithms, and once we've created these beautiful creatures, they need to be governed. We need to keep checking on them, ensure that they haven't drifted, and so on. And I think the 3rd level of bias is really important, and we probably wouldn't see as many of these examples as if we had less bias in the people that are writing these algorithms. And you know, I was listening to the head of the AI, the Office of AI recently, who was observing that out of the data scientists that we have in the UK, only 1 in 10 are women. So we need to get all levels of those biases looked at, of the data, of the algorithms, and the people that are building them.
I mean, hugely powerful. I mean, you mentioned to me before this session you were going to play that video and gave me a little bit of context, but I've got to say, kind of watching it and just hearing her so eloquently deliver that poem with so many kind of really powerful points was just great. So thanks for sharing that with us, and some really kind of interesting things we all should take away from that. And we, each and every one of us has responsibility there. So that was really fascinating. So I'm going to go back to some of the questions. Got so many.
Sure.
So a question from Alan Blunt. So Alan asks, what are the risks of AI? So we've covered a little bit of that already, but is it really artificial and intelligent when it is in the end just programming? Is the human element the greatest risk of all?
So another great question. Excuse me, Alan. Thank you for that. So the human element, there are a number of elements that I've described there, right? About the data, about the algorithms, and about the people. And so you could potentially argue that the human element, is the most important, which is why, I mean, I observed at the start here that, it's my belief that it's the combination, right, of people and algorithms that are going to deliver, the best impact. I was looking at some of this stuff in medical diagnoses, and there's a multiple choice exam, 100 multiple choice questions. Guess what? The person got 75% accuracy, took them 75 minutes. So 75% accuracy, 75 minutes. The algorithm got 85% accuracy in 5 minutes. But in combination, the AI and the person got 91% accuracy. And so I think there are a number of elements that need to come together, Alan, but the human in the loop, I believe, is critical. And actually, to the start of your question, it's more about mathematics actually than computer science that is driving progress in AI. The other thing that's driven progress in AI, and AI has been around for a long time, over 20 years. 3 things. One is that compute power is massively increased. 2 is that data has exploded, and we can manage it more effectively with many of the cloud applications. And we've seen improvements in algorithms, particularly in the area of deep learning. And again, I would just say that it's more mathematical in construct than necessarily computer science, but they go hand in hand.
Very interesting. And linking into that question about the kind of human connection, Azim Rashid asks, will AI replace low-skilled workers?
So another great question. Thank you, Azim. So when I think about the future of the workforce, I see three impacts. They all begin with A. So the first is that yes, some roles will be potentially entirely automated. Maybe 5 to 10%, possibly depend. Different experts have different views, but it seems to be, that order of magnitude. So the first one is about automation. The second A is about augmentation. So, my belief is that every job will be impacted at the task level by AI. So, taking away the bits of our jobs that frankly weren't designed for human beings, right? Manual things that just can be detected at scale. And I've given some examples of that. So that's the augmentation piece. And I believe that pretty much every job will be affected to some extent by AI. And then the third area, when I think about future jobs, is these additional jobs, new ones that are going to come up. Of course, in data science, and we're going to see a lot more of that. But we're also going to see, from a humanities perspective, we're going to need many more people that come from, from sociology, from psychology. We need ethicists, for example. So 3 A's, some automation. That are going to become increasingly important for us.
Yeah, I think that's the key, isn't it? Really, it's kind of ensuring that people have the right skills for a kind of future world. And I've got to say a big shout out to the work BT do across the West Midlands. I work alongside some other people at the combined authority, and BT do a tremendous job of helping both young people and people that are maybe coming from traditional backgrounds reskill into digital. And I think those digital skills aren't just the ones we may think of straight away, like coding, right? There are other areas around. Are you seeing that in BT, Adrian? Are you seeing kind of more and more demand across the BT estate for those type of roles?
Yeah, I mean, when I think about what's happened in the last 7 months, I see sort of three pandemics. One is the health pandemic with COVID. Second one is an economic pandemic that is in part linked and very strongly to COVID, but is broader. If you think about trade, Trump and China, and a host of other things. And then the third sort of pandemic is the one around that's become much more prominent with some of the stuff in the news that we're all familiar with around Black Lives Matter is the racial inequality pandemic. So those three. But if you think about what we've done, in terms of digital transformation, in our businesses, in our lives over the last 6 to 7 months, that's a huge, massive shift, and we're going to continue to see that shift, I believe, for the foreseeable future. So the whole area of skills and helping, not just hiring the new skills, but also helping people to retrain, reskill, is critical for all of us, in my belief, because under those three pandemics, digital skills has become much more important. Data skills have become much more important, and I would say that diversity and inclusion has become much more important as well.
Yeah, indeed. And I, as a so-called digital native, I already feel out the loop tremendously when it comes to some of the new digital skills that are emerging. So it's so fast-paced. It's hard to keep up sometimes. I've got a question here from Matt West. So Matt asks, how do you foresee AI impacting competition between small disruptors and large established businesses in the long term? When large companies have the most data leads to more intelligent AI, which then leads to better products, which results in more data being collected, and the cycle continues. And I suppose his point is, how possibly can a small business compete in that world?
Yeah, so I mean that I'm not sure whether you said it was Nat West or Matt West, but I think you probably said Matt.
It's Matt, but yeah, it could well be a code name.
Sorry, I'm just being a little bit silly. Thank you, Matt. Another great question, and I think that's not that I think, I know that's why we've seen I think there are three trends, right? And I mentioned one around the regulators looking in the US, and in Europe at big technology companies. They seem primarily to be looking at US ones at the moment. That's one feature. The second one is, at a citizen level, at a consumer level, I think there's a lot of concern about how our personal data is managed, and I've referred to some of the ways in which we might think about, consents and having more ownership, and some ideas around that previously. And I think the third trend is one around, governments as well. If you look at Macron and Merkel comments from them recently about how do we take back more ownership and possession of our personal data in an EU context, and the number of things that are happening across telecoms, for example, alliances that are forming in Europe, for example, to try and counter some of these trends. But then you asked, how do small companies compete, right? And we've seen, I would put Ocado, as one of those small companies, right? Ocado is maybe 1.5% market share, something like that, a fraction of the size of Tesco, right? Tesco have had all this data, done Humby and all the rest of it, you know, for many, many years now. Well, look what happened 2 weeks ago, right? Ocado's share price, you know, valuation, a fraction of the size of Tesco was ahead of them, right? Just for a little while, but they're still knocking at very, very close. And why? You know, my belief is that, you know, Ocado is not in the retail business, it's in the technology business, right? And, you know, I've been out to visit the Ocado team, and some of the work that they're doing is incredible. You know, they build all their own robots. They optimize them using machine learning models. Those crates that they pack, you know, our food in. Well, guess what? You know, they're using computer vision to decide when they need to be cleaned. And you might think that's a trivial use case, right? But actually, this has to discern the difference, you know, between a stain and dirt before it sends this crate. I mean, this is the level of sophistication that this small company, right? This team get invited to go talk to the big tech companies, right? That's one example. And then on a global scale, I mean, TikTok, where did TikTok come from? I mean, like wow, right? The fastest ever user growth, right? Way ahead of Facebook, way ahead of WhatsApp, fastest ever, TikTok. In part because of, you know, the positioning and how they do that, but a lot of this is around their AI capability, and I would suggest that some of the reasons that, you know, Microsoft and other companies are interested in buying TikTok is to do with, you know, the way in which they've scaled from being, you know, a small company unknown to the rest of the world to the fastest ever growing social platform on the planet.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's the agility that a small business has is really their key asset at that stage in their growth. I mean, we only have to look on our own doorstep here in the West Midlands and look at Gymshark. So Gymshark, Ben Francis, you know, started Gymshark by using his grandmother's sewing machine to create, you know, new sportswear for people that go to gyms because he couldn't find any that actually suited him. Now, that's a typical kind of entrepreneur story, but where I find it really fascinating is the kind of speed at which they've grown. And really kind of what, you know, if you think about it, Gymshark are a you know, fashion apparel sports retailer, but they're not, right? They're a technology company. And they've kind of made sure from day one, technology sits at the heart of every single thing they do. And that allows them to scale. So I think that absolutely, Adrian, to your point, you know, invest in technology, invest in the right infrastructure, utilize the data. I mean, I remember working with Tesco and dunnhumby and being shocked at the data that they were using. You know, I think it was 1.5% of all data they were utilizing. And it's not because they couldn't, it's because they didn't have the kind of resources to actually, you know, turn that data into something actionable and insightful. So yeah, I think in some respects, it's always going to be that David and Goliath moment. And that's what makes it fun, hey?
Yeah, but I also think, you know, that actually, you know, digital is a bit of a leveler, right? That, you know, boundaries of geographic, you know, don't really matter any longer. That, you know, we can scale businesses, you know, much more rapidly in the digital era than we were able to earlier. So, you know, Matt, your question is a great one, in that yes, I think we do need to be careful. If you look at, you know, the work that Shoshana Zuboff, surveillance capitalism, you know, probably one of the best, you know, leading thinkers on this, is about how our data is managed. So we do need to be very thoughtful and careful about that. But I also feel as though, you know, for small businesses, that there's a real opportunity, you know, to run hard and to get the scale that, you know, digital that gives us and the internet gives us that we didn't have before.
100%, yeah. And we've got a question here from Romeo, who asks, Adrian, from your experience, what challenges do you see, if any, in order to collect data in the first place to nurture AI applications?
So, I mean, collection of data and then, you know, how you manage it is still a fundamental challenge, right? We, You know, we hire these data scientists that are hard to find, you know, command, you know, premiums in the job market. And then guess what? They spend, you know, 60 to 70% of their time doing data wrangling, data hygiene, data quality type work, right? So, you know, ingesting data, ensuring, you know, its health, making sure it's of the right quality so that we can, you know, feature engineering and so forth, is going to continue to be a critical part of what we need to do. You know, there's sort of saying that, you know, data science eats AI for breakfast, right? Because, you know, the really heavy lifting happens in the data science work, and part of that is getting access to the data. Part of that is actually the hygiene, you know, of the data, and then all of the feature engineering work that we need to do to get, you know, to get the value unlock out. But I also fun point I would make on that is that, you know, the cloud platforms, you know, are pretty critical in enabling us to do that, you know, at a scale and a speed. And then they got all the compute power embedded in there, and then they got all these beautiful APIs as well, right? That enable us to do things that we couldn't do before. So, and then things like auto ML in some of the platforms, right? That mean that we probably, you know, we might get to a stage where actually, you know, a lot of those models are generated for us, you know, automated generation of models. And BT are working on something we call autonomics, which is a world where you almost have the equivalent of self-driving cars, self-driving AI that is, you know, looking at the AI, keeping an eye on it, checking that it's the right thing for the purpose, and so on. So I think we're going to see, you know, in combination with the data focus, you know, we also need to spend more time on the AI side too.
Definitely. And that quote, data science eats AI for breakfast, is that a play on the Peter Drucker quote, culture eats strategy for breakfast?
Yeah, I think so. I can't remember who I heard say that, but a thinker that's much greater than me. And I just, you know, I believe in stealing with pride, right? And, you know, that's, I'm pretty sure where it would have come from, the origin of it.
Great. I love it. I'm going to use that one myself, Adrian, if you don't mind. We'll keep sharing it. Share the love. I've got a question here from Louise. Louise asks, as someone with 2 young daughters, what's the best route for my daughters to consider a career in AI and data? Would it be telling them to go to university, or should they go and seek out resources and real world experience? Which one?
Gosh, Louise, I mean, I'm reluctant to give any parent advice on you know, I'm finding it hard myself giving my own kids advice, right? And what they should do. And normally the advice I give them, they don't take. So that's my first comment. But I would say I don't think it's either or anymore. I mean, we can combine those, you know, those things. What I do know, you know, from the data that I look at, is that, you know, to my comment earlier, you know, only 1 in 10 data scientists in the UK are women. You know, that it's important in the early stages, and quite often, you know, I understand, you know, 7 to 9 age group is where it becomes critical to, you know, to begin to excite, you know, our children about the world of technology and AI and so on, and to make it, you know, make it understandable to them and exciting, you know, to them. So those are some of the things I would say. The other thing I would just observe is that, you know, in some communities that I work with, and I was, you know, the chair of the Race Equality Board for 5 years. We also need to think about parents, not just the kids, and teachers as well. But, you know, in some communities, you know, parents tell their kids, you've got 3 choices, right? You can be a doctor, a lawyer, or an accountant. Those are the things that you can be. And so we need collectively, to help our kids, as you seem to be wanting to do, Louise, and please don't stop doing that, to excite them about the world of what we do. There's one thing I would point you to, Louise, is an organization called STEMETS that is run by Anne-Marie Imafidon, who is a genius, a computer scientist, first woman, I think, to get a double first at Oxford in computer science. And she now runs this. And she says, when she talks to young women and girls about a future in STEM subjects, says there are 3 reasons why you should do this, 3 F's. First is you're going to get lots of free food, right? There's really great food at Google and Facebook and all, it's all free. Second is you're going to have a lot of fun, right? And then the third one is you're going to make a lot of money. So the third F is funds. You're going to make 25% more on average by having a career in STEM than in many others. But have a look at STEMETS, Louise, because I think you'll find Anne-Marie will give you a lot better advice than I'm doing right now.
That's I mean, that is great advice, though, Adrian. I think there's some kind of great resources there that you've referenced. And yeah, I'm going to wrap up the last kind of, there's a few questions that kind of link together. They're all really around how can people get in touch with you, really. So one person is looking for kind of some mentoring support. Another person, I think, just wants to kind of carry on the conversation with you because they found it absolutely fascinating. And another person is looking for kind of, I suppose, ideas around how they can kind of connect their startup with BT. Are there any kind of startup programs that BT run? So yeah, are there any ways that people can get in touch with you, or any channels that they can engage with you on?
Yeah, I mean, trying to do this at scale is pretty challenging. With I don't know if we do have any startup help. I know Wendy, who helped arrange this, is probably on the call. So Wendy, maybe we can follow up and share information on startups and how to get in touch with us on this. On the mentoring, I mean, I have 10 mentees probably at any one time, and I've just taken on another 3 at BT. But if I can do things at scale, right, where we get 10, 20 people together at once, then it becomes a little bit easier for me to do that. And it's always heartening to me when I present at events like this for people to ask these questions, and I think, oh my gosh, how am I going to handle it? How do we help to have these follow-on discussions? But Wendy, let's maybe see if there's a way in which we can do that and then channel it into the right parts of BT. But very happy to help where I can.
Yeah, and I think we can support there as well, Adrian. So maybe you Wendy and I can kind of take that offline and work out a way of delivering something to a lot of people, and possibly through the combined authority as well, so we can reach even more people in one go as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that takes us to pretty much the end now. So I mean, that has been so much to take in. Completely fascinating. My mind's blown. So Adrian, thank you so much for kind of giving your valuable time today to be a part of this. Any kind of final words of wisdom or thoughts?
Well, I mean, I just say thank you to you, Yanis, and your team, and to everybody who attended, and to all your great questions. I mean, I felt as though I was interviewing for my job all over again. So thank you for that. But I would just finally say I'm an AI optimist, and there are many people who rightly believe that we need to be very careful, almost careful to the extreme of not doing anything. And I would just urge you to jump in, make sure that what you're doing is connected to business value, that you can always see the link between, whether it's AI or advanced analytics or whatever the tech trend that you're looking at. Make sure there's a good connection to value. When I say value, I mean both business value and societal value.
Wonderful. Thanks, Adrian.